Legislative issues. As the chamber director, you, of course, have been keeping an eye on some of the legislation that's working its way through Santa Fe, and that's why I wanted to have you on this hour, since we couldn't have you on last hour, just to get a legislative update. What are you watching? What are some of the bills that you see going through? I know that there was a push last week to get our legislators to vote no on a couple of bills that were being debated and discussed. So let's kind of get into our legislative update.
Yeah. So the private right of action has been a really big deal, and that is, and I can't get my computer up right now, so unfortunately, that's another problem I guess I'll have to solve here as soon as we're done. But private right of action has been a big deal. It made it through a committee and is headed to judiciary. We thought it was going to be heard there on Saturday, and it got bumped off the agenda. I'm not sure why. And theoretically, it'll get rescheduled for sometime this week, I'm guessing. That bill opens up the potential for lawsuits against industry. And I think probably the idea was to target oil and gas. As we know, that's, oil and gas, unfortunately, is often a target in New Mexico. But it's broad enough, it's written broadly enough that it could really get any industry. We're talking dairy, ag, refining, oil and gas production. It doesn't stop. So the idea is that if they have infringed upon your rights, or there's been some sort of incident that's made you uncomfortable, you can, as an individual, can file a lawsuit against that company or that industry. And it just opens the door for lawsuits, just endless lawsuits against companies, bogging down the courts, of course, and making it probably very difficult to do business, while you're continually potentially continually battling lawsuits. And then it kind of begs the question, who would want to come to this state if they see sort of an open invitation for lawsuits against your industry? So
right.
That's essentially what that bill does. It's been a big one for New Mexico Chamber. They've been very, very proactive on that and don't get a good feeling about shutting it down. So they really need everybody to step up and call your legislators, email your legislators. We sent we had sent some information out about how to email the Judiciary Committee. This is on the House side, and we're hoping that people will take that opportunity and do it again when that thing gets back up on the agenda, which we'll let you know when it does.
Yeah.
There's a good chance it'll go through judiciary, which then means we need to focus on all of our representatives in the House to remind all of them. And there will be a way for you to email all of them, not just your own. I think it's important to flood all of the legislators on the House side, particularly right now, with that message.
And I kind of scratched my head on this one because there are currently in law avenues for people to take if they feel that they have been wronged by a company. So that's why it boggles the mind that they felt that necessary. Some people feel it's necessary to take it to this next step. You're not personally responsible for so many things, but by gosh, you are personally responsible for whatever perceived injustice is imposed upon some individual by an individual within a entity, whether it's a police department, fire department, city business, or, as you said, a corporate entity. I could just see, like you said, I could just see so many lawsuits and clogging up the courts, and you're right. People are going to look at that and they're going to say, I don't have to do business in New Mexico. We'll park.
And there's a provision.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you can go across the border. How many miles is it to the Texas border?
Exactly.
And that's what, I think that's what this whole eastern side of the state keeps looking at over and over again. But the whole state really should be concerned about it. It's it's easy to do business a lot easier at this point to do business in other states, and so we don't need the help running people off for sure.
No, we don't.
There's a provision in this bill also that allows for you to go back 3 years. So this isn't even, if this bill were to become law, it wouldn't even be just anything going forward. It could be anything that may have occurred in the last
3 years. Yeah, it's just it's crazy. Businesses are either going to leave the state or they're going to automate to minimize human contact as much as possible. If you have to be in the state, then you're going to automate the son of a gun, or you're going to operate it remotely, or you're just going to send people in from out of state to do maintenance and repair on things, and it's going to be another job killer for New Mexico, in my opinion, Hayley. In my opinion, yes. I should probably say that.
So the New Mexico Chamber, and this all just came up yesterday. The New Mexico Chamber is getting ready to release ads across the state, and and newspapers around the state. And I'm sure that there'll be some other marketing efforts, hopefully on radio and in social media, to get the attention of all of our legislators on the House and Senate side, just across the board, that we are. The New Mexico Chamber will argue, and I think we could agree, well, I know our chamber agrees, that New Mexico is losing sight of what needs to be important right now, and that is getting our kids back in school, getting our state reopened, and bringing jobs back. Mm-hmm. On this, as an example of that, back on this bill that we were just talking about, the private right of action, mm-hmm. I participated in a Zoom meeting it was last Friday, that was a working group to talk about the points of that legislation and how and why it should be opposed. And the organizations that were represented in that meeting was phenomenal. So it wasn't just oil and gas. In fact, they were just a little part of the conversation. There was agriculture, there was dairy, there were the chili producers, there was even a wind energy organization there to say oil and gas or dairy or ag, whatever may be the focus today, but who's to say that the industries that our state says they want to transition to won't be the focus later?
Sure.
So why wouldn't green energy industries be the focus of lawsuits later? Why wouldn't recreational cannabis growers and providers be the target later? So these industries that the governor and our legislature, I say that very loosely, our legislature, and I know not all of them are for this,
right,
want to transition to, who's to say that they won't be the focus later?
Right.
So New Mexico Chambers putting out this ad copy that hopefully we'll see next, actually tomorrow. And if I could get my email up, I could share you a little bit more about it with you, but my email won't open.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Outlook, don't fail me now.
Yeah.
But,
we'll keep an eye on that.
Kind of a plea.
Get your chamber.
Keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
And we'll also put out some talking points. So the ad that you will see coming out will reference 20 bills that the New Mexico Chamber is working on or is focusing on. There are several others, but that private right of action is in there as well. Paid sick leave, another minimum wage bill. There are several in there that are basically they feel are setting the state back rather than focusing on what needs to be the focus right now, which is getting schools back in 5 days a week, getting our state reopened, getting our restaurants open, getting our businesses open, and getting our economy jump started.
Yeah. Talking about
right now they feel like
talking about the minimum wage. I mean, that's another one. The proponents of it like to call it the living wage. But
right,
so many of these jobs that are entry-level jobs are not intended to be jobs that people live on. the kids that work at the fast food industry are not expected to, quote unquote, live on what they make at those industries. And so again, if you raise the minimum wage above a certain point, it becomes beyond what the business can pass on to the consumer, because that's what they're going to do.
Right.
The evil business owner isn't going to say, "Oh, darn it, I can't make as much money. I guess I'll have to put off the Corvette purchase for another 6 months." That's not going to happen. They're going to jack up the price of whatever it is that they sell, and it's so frustrating, because then they're either, like I said, they're either going to automate or just find another place to go and do business, or find another product that they can go and do business with.
Well, and in a shout out to our small businesses, I would argue that corporations, larger corporations, I think, are less likely to absorb that cost than small businesses. So, for example, any large corporation can raise their prices. They know that there's a certain demand for their product, or they can get away with it because they're large enough. And they will raise their prices.
Right, and they can absorb it more. They can absorb it more, but in many cases, they're going to advocate for the increase in the minimum wage because they can absorb it, and all that does is put pressure on the mom and pops and the small businesses and forces them to either. It's evil. It's evil for a major corporation to look at that and say, "Look at us," and they pound themselves on the chest. "We're paying people the living wage. We're in favor of the living wage." Well, yeah, you can absorb it better, but the flower shop or the local restaurant or whatever, they can't, and so they wind up going out of business. So you run your competition out of business. I mean, it's evil, Hayley. It's evil is what it is.
I do feel like our small businesses too are the businesses who are more likely to try to absorb those costs themselves, because they do want to support their employees. They don't want to lay people off. They know them. They know their families. They live in their communities, and they care about them.
Yep.
Whereas larger corporations don't tend to, they're a little disconnected from their employees.
Yep.
When you get to a certain level, right? But here, our local businesses, I would argue, would do everything they could to keep every employee they have, no matter what the cost, until they just cannot bear it anymore.
Right.
And raising their prices is more difficult in a small community. Laying people off is more difficult in a small community because they're more emotional about it. They care about their people and their community and their employees and their families. And so it just is such a huge hit on small businesses who cannot take it, while large corporations can.
Yeah.
A lot more easily.
And most of these...
And so it's really unfortunate.
It is. And most of these entry-level jobs, I mean, these are kids. They're probably high school kids. I mean, they need to come up with enough money to put gas in the car and pay the cell bill.
Yes.
And it's not like they can go anywhere because they can't go to the movie. They can't, I mean, it's just, there's so many things that are just so frustrating about this, the whole thing. That it's very unfortunate.
Well, and I would also argue that if you let an economy thrive, most of the time minimum wage takes care of itself.
Absolutely.
So, for example, when we were talking about minimum wage a few years ago in New Mexico, we were looking down here in southeast New Mexico where our economy was thriving. There were more jobs than there were people, and you couldn't find a company in Artesia, in southeast New Mexico, that paid minimum wage.
Right.
Because they all paid more than that.
That's right.
Because there was a demand. And so I feel like when an economy thrives, minimum wage takes care of itself.
That's right. It does. There's some economists, and of course they get yelled at and screamed and kicked out of the room, but some people say the minimum wage should be zero and the market should take care of it, but we're not going back there.
No, we're not.
My first pay raise, I was working in my first job in radio, and I think I was getting $2.20 an hour. And
wow.
And so I was going to get married, and so I went to the boss and I said, "Hey, I'm going to get married. I think I've done a good job. Can I get a little more money?" And he says, "Yeah, you can have a little more money. We'll take you up to $2.35." And I thought, "Wow, I got 15 cents an hour. Cool." And then I go back and I go check the news coming in on the wire, and I read where Congress had passed an increase in the minimum wage.
Oh.
So I didn't get a pay raise because I earned it. I got a pay raise because Congress made them pay me more money, you know.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, it's yeah. I can remember getting. I think I made about $6 an hour when I worked in Washington at basically a minimum wage job.
Yeah.
And I got by.
Yeah,
I didn't have a car.
Most
I walked
people
everywhere I went.
Figure it out at some point. So
lattes were off limits, and I just had to manage. I had to manage my money. So
lattes are off limits, huh?
Lattes were off limits when I didn't have any money.
Yeah. Yeah. Back in the day, you used to poke fun at that big national coffee chain when you said $4, but now, what does $4 get you anywhere?
Right.
So,
no, that's about right. That is true. That is true. Remember those days?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. So what have we keeping an eye on some other legislation? Anything else you'd like to mention that folks need to keep an eye on?
That's kind of the big one we're fighting now. Of course, there are some water bills that will make transfer of water rights a little bit more difficult and create a more regulatory burden, I guess, to make that happen, which could really slow things down, particularly in oil and gas. There is a produced water bill that I don't actually know the status of that right now, but we will find out as soon as we can get our computer going.
Yeah. Hey, I wonder how Senator Purtle's joint resolution on New Mexico. I wonder if that's going anywhere. I'd be curious to know.
I imagine that it's not going to go far, but I really know that it's striking conversation. There's another big topic that we're trying to figure out what's happening, kind of what the latest is, and that is liquor licensing, which has been kind of a big issue in New Mexico over the last few years. Ron Griggs, who is a senator out of Alamogordo, has been working on legislation for a number of years to try to change the liquor licensing system in New Mexico. So most people have heard, especially if you deal with the restaurants at all, you'll know that a liquor license for a restaurant can be somewhere around $750,000. So
Yep.
it becomes an asset on the books. It's it's the banks know about it. It's you loan against it. Or borrow against it, I guess you could say. And there's been a push to change that system so that it's more of a permitting issue rather than an asset that costs so much money and is so limited, so that.
Now you're messing with the market again. I mean, it may be a good idea.
Messing with the market.
But yeah.
Right.
Ooh.
And that's been the big debate, So in some ways, the way that it's handled now really restricts development in rural areas. So,
that's true.
In Albuquerque, a restaurant may come in and they can afford that because they know that they have a critical mass of a customer base in a bigger city. And in rural areas, you don't have that as much. So it becomes much more expensive, customer for customer, I guess, if you will, to build something like that.
Yeah, and we're talking about a full-blown liquor license, not a beer and wine license.
Not a beer and wine. That's a different deal. Just a full-blown liquor license.
Yeah.
And but how do you transition from one to the other? That's the big question. And there's no good answer. And they're working on that. They work on that year after year. They're working on it again this year. I'm not sure that this is the right time, but some would argue that we need every opportunity we can to encourage new business to grow everywhere in the state.
Yeah.
But how you work that out with current license holders, owners, is a huge question.
You're just sitting here thinking about it. I was thinking, what about a sublease?
Oh.
So everybody that has one can sublease 2 or 3 or 4 other smaller ones. Then the original owners. Well, anyway, you and I aren't going to solve it here, so that's silly for me to even think about.
It's so complicated. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that is going back and forth a lot in in the legislature right now, and I'm not really sure where it is. I know that there's more than one bill, and they may be trying to sort out. Sometimes they'll try to blend bills together into one bill that has a chance of moving forward. The second question, as far as all that goes now, is delivering alcohol during the pandemic. So they're trying to solve that question too. So we've been kind of tracking that one. Some of our chambers are really interested in that, so we've been listening to that debate.
Yeah.
Go round and round our chamber circle.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
So.
Well, Hayley, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I know it's hard for everybody trying to figure things out today. The last I heard, I got a call from Mr. Knoll, and as far as the schools are concerned, due to the continued threat of electrical blackouts, there will be no in-person learning today. Staff may access classrooms as needed to provide remote instruction. However, if able to work remotely, please do so. Students should access remote learning as power allows and stay safe. So that is the situation with the schools here. And let's see, what else did I see?
And remote learning might be a little bit difficult today because of the rolling blackouts, too. So I would expect that kids will have a hard time, in some cases, getting online to tap into their teachers and whatnot if their power gets shut off.
Yeah. Carlsbad campus of NMSU will be closed today. Let's see. Who's this one from? This is from the Artesia schools. Roswell schools have canceled school today on the 16th. City of Roswell Municipal Court will be closed all day today. Chavis County offices are closed due to the rolling blackouts and the weather. So better check with whatever entity that you are with. CVE is encouraging folks to follow them on Facebook because they're posting updates and having information there. Whether or not you're a CVE customer or not, they're putting some information out there. So that'll be good.
Yes. And try hard to just conserve energy where you can.
Yes.
Don't do your laundry. Turn off your lights where you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those kinds of things. It'll help them out.
There you go.
So I know CVE. We talked with CVE yesterday, and they're working really hard to handle their loads and move things around. I don't know how that works exactly, but they were trying really hard to avoid the rolling blackouts. And as we know, this morning they just couldn't avoid it any longer.
Yep.
So they tried hard for their customers.
That's right. That's right. All right. Yeah. Well, Hayley, thank you so much. Hopefully the power comes back on and you'll have to make a decision. Do I check my email or do I make coffee? You'll have to,
Coffee first.
Good for you.
Coffee first. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Kith and Kin is open.
Doesn't matter.
Kith and Kin is open, by the way. And they didn't open till 10 yesterday, so we didn't get the coffee yesterday morning. And then Tana went by to get something, and they had made coffee thinking today was Monday. So we actually have some Kith and Kin coffee today, so we are very thankful for that.
Well, good. You can live another day.
Ah, yes. All right. Hayley, thank you so much. Appreciate you. All right.